The damsel in distress built Hollywood. Furiosa burned it all down. Here's everything that happened in between and why it's changed more than just the movies. Welcome to AIL, where film meets culture and nothing stays on the surface. Early Hollywood ran on a formula so consistent it became invisible. Women were beautiful, fragile, and in danger. Men were capable, decisive, and on the way. That was the contract, and audiences accepted it because it matched the world that they lived in. The perils of Pauline, King Kong, decades of golden age films where a woman's highest dramatic function was to be in peril long enough to make the hero look good. But here's what those films never admitted. Women had always had agency. They had always fought, decided, led, and survived long before any cameras existed. Film didn't invent the passive woman. It chose her over and over again because she was comfortable, because she was safe, because she kept the power structure intact. And that choice had consequences far beyond the screen. Then the 70s arrived and everything cracked open. Ellen Ripley was not written to be a revolution. She was written to survive. But what Sigourney Weaver brought to Alien was something audiences had never quite felt before. A woman who didn't freeze, didn't wait for instruction, and didn't apologize for being the most capable person in the room. She just was. And that was enough to change everything. Then came Sarah Connor, introduced in The Terminator as a woman running away from her own story, and transformed by Terminator 2 into someone who had rewritten it completely. Not because the world handed her power, but because she took it. These weren't just bold characters, they were proof. Proof that the formula Hollywood had relied on for decades wasn't the truth about women. It was a choice about them, and choices can be unmade. Once that door opened, it never closed again. Katniss Everdeen doesn't wait to be chosen. She steps forward when no one else will. Furiosa doesn't escape her circumstances. She dismantles the entire system that created them. These women aren't reacting to a story written around them. They are the story. They always were. And this shift didn't happen in isolation. As feminist movements demanded real autonomy, equal authority, and genuine agency in the world outside of the theater, storytelling responded. The hero's journey, that ancient, deeply human arc, stopped being a road with a men-only sign. Women claimed it, and in doing so, they didn't shrink it. They expanded it into something richer, more honest, and more true to actual human experience than it had ever been before. But let's be honest about something, because this channel doesn't do comfortable half-truths. This shift came with real friction, and that friction is still alive today. When women stepped into roles that culture had long reserved for men, some men genuinely didn't know what to do. Not out of malice, but because the old script had been their entire instruction manual. Protect, provide, rescue. That was the role. That was the identity. And when the script got rewritten, a lot of men were left standing on stage with no lines. Some stepped up and found a better version of themselves. Some stepped back and got lost. And some, and how can I say this clearly, responded with the kind of violence that still makes the headlines every single day. That's not a reason to reverse the progress. It's a reason to understand it more deeply. Because feminism was never asking men to disappear. It was asking them to show up differently, with intention instead of assumption, with partnership instead of ownership, with chosen strength instead of inherited authority. That is actually a harder thing to do. And the men who've done it, who figured it out, what protection and leadership look like in a world built on equality, those men are more powerful, not less. The problem was never that women got stronger. The problem is that we never gave men a real roadmap for what that meant for them. Film is only now beginning to explore that question honestly, and that conversation is long overdue. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Film is not just entertainment. It is an instruction. It shapes what little girls believe is possible for themselves, and it can shape what boys learn to expect from the women around them. Visibility isn't a political talking point. It's a psychological reality. What we see constantly, we begin to accept as the norm. When the only woman on screen were waiting to be saved, that image seeped into culture quietly and deeply. It told a generation of girls that waiting was the role. It told a generation of boys that rescuing was the power. But when But when Ripley faces the darkness alone, when Furiosa drives the war rig with everything on the line, something shifts. A new possibility opens up, not just for women in the audience, but for everyone. Because expanding who gets to be the hero doesn't diminish heroism, it reveals how much larger it always was. For most of cinema's history, the story was simple. Men act, women wait. But the best stories were never that simple, and neither are we. The woman who broke the rule on screen didn't just change movies. They changed what audience believed was real, what was possible, what strength was allowed to look like. And we're still living in that change. When we shift who stands at the center of the story, we shift what the world believes about us. And that's not a film evolution, that's a human one. If this is the kind of conversation you want more of, film culture and the stories that shape how we see the world, subscribe and come back. New content drops every week. And leave a comment below. Which female character do you think genuinely cracked the formula first? I want to know your answer, and I'll be reading every single one.